That's always fun to understand. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. For those that don't know me, I'm Megan McFall. I am the director here at the USU SPACT down in Southeastern Utah, as well as the regional director for the Small Business Development Center. So I do a lot of focus on small business development when I teach these classes. The major industry in our area down here is actually tourism. So a lot of what I talk about will be tourism related. If you're in a different industry or a different business, please let me know so that I can talk to your business. I would love to make these classes a little more friendly to those that are in the room. So if you have any specific questions or how these different topics can affect your business, please feel free to let us know and to talk. If you are on Zoom and joining us on Zoom, please feel free to break in and talk to me directly. I have no problem with that. In fact, I really enjoy that. I actually teach 3 classes on Mondays, and I get really tired of hearing the sound of my own voice. And so I love when people want to be a part of the workshops and talk and be able to answer those questions directly to their business. No question is not important or doesn't make sense, because I guarantee if you're wondering that same question, then somebody else in the room is asking that same question, because it is probably related to their industry or somehow related to multiple different industries. So do not feel like you can't ask questions. If you don't feel comfortable getting on screen or on Zoom, go ahead and put that in the chat. I will answer those throughout the session. For those that are joining us on the social media platforms, we are live on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, as well as LinkedIn now. For those that are joining us on social media platforms, please put your questions in the chat. I will go through and take time at the end and go through and answer all the questions that come through and be able to do that for you. If I, for some reason, miss a question, go ahead and resubmit that. In the end, I will go through and audit those comments and try and answer them before the day is over. If for some reason I miss something totally, which happens from time to time because I do get busy, go ahead and email those questions to me as well. We can take care of those that way. I'd like to thank our co-host for today. It is the Rural Online Initiative, and I appreciate their help in presenting these workshops. We have a great time working together, and I enjoy the partnership there. If you work remotely, whether it is in business or in your job, I encourage you to check out the Rural Online Initiative. That is a certificate that ultimately teaches you better skills to work online. Now, when I took it it's been about 18 months now that I took it, I thought I was the expert at working online. At the end of the day, I learned a lot. I had been running businesses online for months. In fact, years at that point in time. So I thought I was the expert. I knew everything. And the reason why I had taken that certificate was so that I knew what the students here and the business owners here at the Spark Center were getting themselves into, so I could explain to them what that course was like. And what I found out is that I was missing out on software, and I was missing out on a lot of tools that were incredible assets that I was able to add into my own businesses and what I do here at the Spark Center as well. And so even if you've already been working remotely, I encourage you to take that certificate. It's a powerful aspect, especially with so many businesses moving online with COVID, but also now that we've realized that we can do so much more remotely and be more cost effective, I think that we're going to see a shift in business environment to that direction. So I highly encourage you to check that out. Okay, so this is our agenda today. We're going to talk about what is design think. If you have never done the design think process, you're going to really like today's workshop. Okay, we're going to learn the 5 phases of the design think process. We're going to understand your audience. We're going to identify their challenges, and ultimately we're going to craft and test your solutions. So this is going to be our process today. It's going to be very, very hands-on. So I encourage you to either, we're going to have you open up a Google Docs and have that come out. And then ultimately, if you don't have like a dual screen and can't do both, get a notebook and a pen so that you can participate in today's events. For the person that asked, what is that certificate again? It's called the Rural Online Initiative, or ROI. If you Google remote work certificate, I believe the website is remoteworkcertificate.org. It'll take you directly to it. If you have any other questions at the Q&A session, I can actually give you the link directly to that as well. Okay, so for those of you that have Google accounts and are able to dual screen or able to do both, do a split screen, I encourage you to sign into your Google account. For those that don't have a Google account, I encourage you to get one. Google accounts are free. It gives you access to so many incredible opportunities as far as apps, cloud storage, things like that. So what you will do right now is go to google.com, sign into what you would use for your Gmail. If you already have a Gmail, you have access to all of this, but it's your Gmail information. If you don't have one, you'll have a minute to be able to sign up for one if you would like, but to be able to do that. When you sign in, you're going to go up into that right-hand corner between what is commonly referred to as the waffle, but it's the access to all of the apps. And the drop down, this is where you're going to find all of the apps that Google provides for you free of charge with your Google account. Okay, and we're going to start a new Google file. The easiest way I have found to do that is just to go to the Google Drive, which will be listed in those Google apps. Now, the Google apps will change around based on what you use the most. So if you use Google Drive all the time, it'll be up at the top. If you don't use Google Drive very often, it'll be closer to the bottom and it'll shift. So don't be concerned when it does that. Google tries to be more intuitive with some AI stuff going on, and that can be confusing for some people. So just know that your Google Drive or your Gmail or whatever, Google My Business, will shift as you use them and get more familiar with them. So go to your Google Drive. And then within Google Drive, you can go to New, that's in the left-hand corner, and we're going to open a Google Docs. And we're just going to use a blank doc today. It's more of a note-taking session so that you can basically brain dump or brainstorm, whichever you call it, on that Google Docs. I encourage you to participate and play along with what we're going through right now. So what is design think? So ultimately, design think was actually started and was developed by Stanford University, and it was a 5-step process. But what design think is a creative problem-solving process to focus on the user-centered approach to creating solutions in a I'm struggling today. Technology, I can't say that word for some reason, an economically feasible way. So ultimately, that is what we're going to do. We're going to give you examples today. If you would like to do specific examples for your business, that is totally fine as well. Design think has 5 phases within it. The first is emphasize, define, sorry guys, I had a tooth pulled last week and it's really like messing with me, I guess. Ideate, and then prototype, and then ultimately test. I used to say you plan to check and adjust. It's kind of the same process, but they've spread it out into 5 different phases and done more of a thinking process behind it into multiple different layers. And it ultimately comes into a great way to do both products and services, solutions, but also your partnerships as well when you're looking at a business solutions. So some different things that are in our everyday life that came from design think. The first is on-demand TV, which for me is a huge lifesaver because I'm never home at the same time. When I was growing up, the world stopped for about 3 different TV shows. ER was one of them. I'm an ER kid. Home Improvement was another one. And then we had a couple of other shows that my family just loved, but I remember the world literally stopped during those time frames. We couldn't do anything else because that was the only time we could watch those shows, right? Shifting now, we're never home during those same times. Our schedules are kind of crazy. And so now we have what's called on-demand TV, or we stream it. Most of us don't even have actual TV in our home. We have streaming apps and things like that. We have TVs, but we don't have like the broadcasting stations and things like that. So it's all changed because of the design think process and how people were going to work around the change in environment and culture that we've had over the last 20, 30 years, and how we work. The next would be foot activated door. I had actually never had any experience with this until December. I did some traveling in December. I almost took the entire month off in December because I write grants in December, but also I have use it or lose it vacation time that I have to use up, and darn it, I went to Kentucky actually this year. Kentucky and a few places. I went to Dollywood. Anyway, long story short, I did a lot of traveling, and my car rental actually had the foot activated door, and I thought that was the greatest thing next to sliced bread, because I was able to actually have full arms and to be able to kick that open. And I'm thinking, how great is this, especially for moms and dads that have kids and trying to wrangle kids and bags and everything else, or groceries too, and to be able to open your car door. So that came from a design think process. And then ride and home shares. Ride and home shares are kind of taking over what used to be the hotel and taxi service. And there's kind of mixed opinions on that depending on where you're at and the areas that you're at. Like I said, I'm in the tourism industry. We don't have taxis. We actually don't have the rideshare system here either, but we do have the Airbnb and the home share. And we also have the hotel system. And it's interesting to see the balance between the two and how they fit together, but also kind of the different opinions on each one of them. But they came about from design think and how to make a solution to a problem that people were seeing. So we're seeing these design think in our everyday life. And it's just a matter of knowing how they came around and how can we do that same process? How can we in our businesses or in our jobs maybe to basically create our own design think solution that will change how we do business or how we're addressing different issues that our clients are seeing. So we're going to break these down. The first is empathize. Okay, so we're going to establish empathy. Your goal is to connect to the user storage, or the user story, sorry, I didn't see that one, their emotions, your insights about them. Who is your user, okay? Who is the end user that you want to have impact, and how do they have an emotional impact? What is ultimately the problem that needs to be solved, and how is it impacting those lives, okay? The empathy side of design think is an important aspect that a lot of people miss, and I think it's been missed for several years. So that is going to be an important step that we go through in the process, okay? Understanding your user. Is your user, these are some different aspects that have come up over the years as far as when we've gone through the design think process and we've looked at. So women of color looking for socially conscious brands. Okay, that's been one of the ones that have come up. Parents of young children not yet in school. Okay, that's another sector that has come up in these workshops. Okay, seniors over 70 in single member homes. Okay. Another user is college students seeking temporary housing. So these are some 4 examples that we're going to utilize today. If your business addresses a different issue that you would like to go through this process today, feel free to use that within your own process or within your own brainstorm so that you make this most effective to your business and what you are doing. Okay, so inspire new thinking by discovering what people really need. So for many, many years, we essentially saw a problem and we created a solution. But we want to take that one step deeper, okay? We want to inspire you to think differently and figure out what people really need and how it really impacts. So we want you to select your audience. So whether that is for your personal business or one of the 4 that I had just mentioned, okay? You can do the busy professional, after school teacher, parents of young children, any of those that we talked about. And then I want you to use your Google Docs, or you can use a piece of paper, that's totally fine, and write down at least 10 challenges that this audience faces, okay? So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do that so that you have the time to be able to do that. So we're going to go ahead and start that now. And I'm going to click off or mute myself for 3 minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to put that in the chat or go ahead and come back on and ask those questions. Go ahead and get started. Okay, I hope you were able to get a significant list of challenges that your ideal audience was facing, or if you use one of our examples, I hope you are able to get a list of at least 10 challenges that the audience was facing. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the define the problem. So we have a basic idea, but what we need to do is we need to analyze the observation about your user. Okay, we need to systematize them and define the core problem that you identified as your statement. So ultimately, we are going to go through and create a statement. What is the problem in the statement? So, for example, Sam, your avatar user, or whoever you want to put there, is a busy manager who needs a way to integrate healthy eating habits because he doesn't want to feel like he's on a diet. I don't know about you guys, I hate diets all the time. So I feel for Sam, I'm in that same boat, okay? So ultimately what this person did, or what this example does, is they figured out their end users really busy, okay? Ultimately, at the end of the day, none of us want to feel like we're on a diet, so we need to create healthy habits so that he can stay healthy and in shape, or within a maintained weight, or whatever his goal was, so that he doesn't always feel like he's always on a diet or always restricting, or whatever that looks like for him. So this was the statement that was created based on the information that was gathered by the user. Okay, ultimately, what we want to do is we want to define the problem. Okay, we want to define the problem as the problem statement. We want it to be human-centered, so we want to be person-centered. So just like we did in the last one, and I will go back to the last statement so you have an example. I want you to define the problem. Have a user name, so you can create your own avatar, and I want you to define the problem and then how it needs to be fixed. So I'm going to go back to the previous slide. We're going to give you 3 minutes again to create that statement. Go ahead and get started now. Okay, so now that we have our statement, we can move on to the next, which is ideate. Okay, so your goal in this phase is this is where you're going to engage in an unfiltered, unrestrained brainstorming session. Okay, so this is where you're going to go back and utilize that Google Docs, or if again you can use a notebook if you prefer. I'm a good old-fashioned paper and pen person, and then I move it to the computer, so I totally understand that. But how can we solve the obstacles that you foresee based on the statement that you just created? Okay, so what we're going to do is called Crazy Eights. You're going to create a 2x4 table in your Google Docs. Okay, in each section you're going to write an idea. Okay, don't worry about feasibility right now. Don't worry about, whether the sky's blue or the different things like that. You're going to create an idea in each of those sections. You don't have to worry about what partnerships you have to create, anything like that. Any idea that will work to help create solutions to this problem, you're going to put in that 2x4 section. So essentially you're creating 8 solutions to the problem within this next section. Okay, this will help you brainstorm, and the idea is to be a free form brainstorm where no solution is crazy, no idea will never work, anything like that. You're basically going to dump every idea to help solve this problem onto a sheet of paper. Okay, some people do it really great in a box. My business partner actually does it in the coolest way I've ever seen, but my brain does not work in this way. She puts bubbles all over a page and writes within the bubbles. and then connects them later. It's really quite cool, but my brain doesn't work that way. I work in boxes. So however your brain works, if you don't work in boxes, go ahead and do whatever way works best for how you process information. But essentially, we're going to work in figure out 8 solutions to this problem. Okay. For example, if you were going back to the ideas that we had before. So one of the ideas was women of color are looking for socially, sorry, my notes are too small, socially conscious brands. I'm struggling, I apologize, guys. A program that donates to items to someone in need with every purchase. That might be a great example, okay? The next is an app to help you find local fresh produce. That's another great example, okay? On a student seeking temporary housing, a local roommate matches service for students. Okay, an online roommate matching students with services, okay? A building with furnished temporary rentals is another option, okay? And then last but not least, the online learning programs, okay? So those are just some examples for those options that we came up with earlier that other people that have taken this workshop have come up with over time. We'd love to hear what your examples are. But essentially that's where we're going to go to next. Is we're going to give you 3 minutes within your Google Docs or on a piece of paper to come up with 8 possible solutions to solve the problem statement that you created. Any idea, solution that comes to mind is welcome. Nothing is impossible. You want to put everything down on paper, and then we'll go through. So go ahead and get started, starting right now. So I am getting a couple people that are saying that they need to leave early and won't be able to stay the entire time. For anybody that needs to leave early, you have 2 options to get to watch the rest of it. You can either go to our YouTube channel after we upload. We do have to edit some stuff because I do music in the beginning and things like that. But we will upload the full recording. Usually I do it today or tomorrow by the latest, so you can watch whatever portion you missed, or you can get on our YouTube or our Facebook page and watch the full live that we have. And so both of those places, I know that you can get it on a regular basis. LinkedIn, I'm still working out the whole live and how that's saved. And then Instagram, that seems to be a catch and miss, depending on when you get on there, because it goes away after, I think, 24 hours. So, okay, moving on to the next phase, we're going to prototype. In the prototype phase, your goal is to draw out and craft what is possible, keeping in mind variable products. So your MVP, okay? What is your MVP, okay? So you're gonna look through ultimately what is either accepted, improved, or re-examine, or what could be rejected. So now we're going to relook at what you did, what you wrote down, those 8 things that you wrote down, and we're going to really examine what could be the best option, okay? So your MVP, we kind of look like essentially that top row is kind of how we used to do it, I guess, is the best way to put that. So we would start putting things together one piece at a time. What we want you to do is look at it in a phase of development. Instead of building, like, for example, building a car where you look at, you have the wheels, the axles, the frame, ultimately the body of the car, and then the details. What we want to look at is the evolution of the project. So we might start with a skateboard, and then a scooter, and then move to a bike, and then a motorcycle, and then to a car. So ultimately, we want to look at the evolution of your project. And then through the evolution of your product, or your project, whether it is a product or service or a collaboration, you might be able to go from a skateboard to the scooter, to the bike, to the motorcycle, to the car. And by doing that, you take something that was impossible before, And by laying the groundwork through the other projects or the other ideas that you have, you now make something possible. That's why in that phase before, we said nothing is impossible, because we're laying the groundwork and putting the impossible and trying to make it possible. So essentially, that is what we're trying to create, is taking it and putting the evolution. So a really great example that I like to talk about is our center here. So when I started here, there essentially was not a center. There was a small part-time business resource center. Over the course of 18 months, we did the design think process, and we went through the process of developing the education, the business development, the co-working space, the training programs, and we took it step by step by step. And in the course of 18 months, what would normally take 5 years, we were able to develop and move it into an entire, what is known now as the SPARK Center. And SPARK stands for Small Business, Personal Development, Application, Resources, Certifications. So ultimately, that's what we want you to do with your project, is take it through every single state. Was there somebody that had a question? Okay, I just want to make sure that I didn't miss somebody's question. Okay, so the next phase, we're going to build a rough prototype to learn how to make ideas better. Okay, pick one of your feasible ideas and flush it out, okay, to build it up. Think of the technology that's needed, the time requirement, the money that's needed, because money is huge, cash is king, right? And the resources that are available, and flush it out just like we did on that bottom row. Take it from the skateboard to the scooter to the bike to the motorcycle to the car. Take it through every phase of that operation and make it into, see what it's going to take to make that operation work. Okay. The next phase is ultimately going to be test. Now, we don't have time to build out your prototype. I encourage you to do that when you have time to do that. If you have, like, for example, if you need additional help, feel free to email me. We can set up an appointment to go through that additional help and to really build that out. But the next phase is going to be test. You want to test any idea that you have and put it out there so that you know if it's going to have the impact that you see that it is having. Having those additional ideas and those additional feedback is going to make your idea more impactful. You might get some feedback to realize that maybe you need to add an additional step, or maybe it's going to cost more money than you thought, or maybe it will be on a much faster timeline than you thought. And that can be a good or a bad thing if you're not prepared for it, especially in business. If things are going to go a lot quicker, but you don't have the capital to back up that quick process, then that can actually put a business out of business because you're not prepared for it. So you need to make sure that you go through this process. It's an important aspect of this process. Okay, so test the product completely. Using the best solutions identified during the prototyping phase, redefine and alter as needed. This is essentially a living, breathing prototype, a living, breathing test. So make sure you make those alterations as needed to make sure that this process really fits what is needed, okay? You want to make sure this is intuitive. So what is an intuitive process that you can do for your testing? And every product, every service might be different depending on what area or industry that you are in. So how can you use design think today within your industry? Okay, there's a lot of different ways, different aspects that everybody can do that, and it's going to be different again on what industry that you're in. An example is Sunrise Coffee. Okay, the former barista basically opened her first coffee shop on the first day of the Great Recession back in 2008. That's really, really hard. I actually had a business that literally got their LLC license from Navajo Nation 5 days after the COVID was requirement, or the requirement in order to get COVID relief. And so they didn't qualify for any COVID relief. So things like that will happen when you're in business. And so Anyway, so she went into business the first day was the Great Recession back in 2008, and now she owns 3 cafes. While she was initially inherent to tackle the first digital tools, her online presence became critically important, especially through the COVID pandemic in her city of Las Vegas. So ultimately she opened in Las Vegas. Having a social presence became critical because if any of you went to Las Vegas during COVID, you know that it was a completely different scene in Las Vegas. There was nobody there. It was empty parking lots. It was very different. I actually went there, and it was kind of, for me, it was spooky because I know Vegas as being so many people 24 hours a day. Something's always going on. It's a live private city, right? It was very, very different. It was very, very spooky almost. So ultimately, her and her team came up with, through the design thinking process, came up with a way to pivot digitally. Something that they hadn't done since they had opened since 2008, and they created an online digital presence. They did social media online advertising, they did online coffee sales, and ultimately they did coffee donations to first responders and healthcare. Again, went back to that social responsibility. If you were a doctor or a nurse or an EMT in the middle of COVID, your coffee was your lifeline. My sister works in an ER, and I can tell you right now, coffee was a lifeline after those long shifts and things like that they went through. And so that was hugely important. But using the design thinking process, she was able to pivot her marketing strategy to what would work for her business through COVID, and was able to stay in business where most coffee shops and most restaurants really struggled, and several did not make it through. Okay, so the process that we've gone through, or we talked about today, the first is empathize. Okay, get engaged with the community that you want to either have impact in, or that is your ideal audience. There's no way to understand your ideal or your target audience than to be engaged and immersed into that community. Okay, define what the problem is and how to form your POVs. Then ideate, identify the problem and find the solutions. And the next phase obviously is the prototype phase. The idea, or get your ideas out into the world. And remember, instead of taking it in phases of building a car, take it in how to get to the car. So the skateboard, the scooter, the bike, the motorcycle, the car, and then ultimately the car. Take it through that phase versus the steps of building the car. Okay, and then last but not least, test and learn the different aspects of your business and how it's going to be affected in different ways. You want to know all of those different things. It might take you an extra 6 months to get that information, but it's worth it, especially if it's going to affect your bottom line and negative impact, or if it's going to be so fast growing that it's going to hurt your business because you don't have the capital ready to put such a plan in place, and then you need to rethink the money strategy behind your plan. Or maybe you need to create a new collaboration or a new partnership to help on the back end because there is a problem that you did not foresee coming, that you found out through the testing process. Make sure you do all of these aspects. Okay, so I really appreciate everybody for joining us today. I am going to take a few minutes and answer questions for those that had to leave. I totally understand that this is a tough time to actually take time out of work. So we really appreciate those that take the 9 to 10 hour away from work. I'm going to go ahead and break out of this and stop sharing my screen. Sorry, guys. I need to see my back of house. And bringing up the social media platforms for questions. If you are still on Zoom, feel free to either ask questions directly or put those into the chat. I would love to answer your questions directly. I try to make these as business friendly for individual businesses as I possibly can. So if I know what questions and how these different items are affecting your businesses, then I can try and do that. So the question is, how did we go from 10 ideas in the initial phase and then to a one problem statement? So ultimately, that's just a brainstorming phase to get you thinking of how the different ideas that affect your audience or your ideal target audience. The reason why we do that is essentially to do the brainstorming aspect. There usually is one thing that you're passionate about that will come out really heavily, but also over the course of time, that also gives you idea development for, like, for example, if you're in a business, that gives you idea development for future products or future services or future collaborations that you can do to help develop your business. So you start with one here, and we work that one this way, and go back to the next one. I do the same thing, and ultimately over time you can develop, like those 10 ultimately. But the idea is to get you thinking about all the different ways. And a lot of the times that I've seen is as people are brainstorming and putting these down, a lot of things are connected. And so they're able to develop multiple products. So like when we did that here for the center, we realized that our workforce development actually affected our business development. And so if we connected them and found out ways to build those together, then we would be able to impact both. And that's why we have both business development and workforce development within the same center. So there's a question on here that says they've been doing research on design think, and one of the aspects is to do a survey to gather information. And what if they don't have people to do the survey with to gather that information? To help them think it clearly, or to help them to get the more information. So in our situation here, we didn't do the survey. Obviously, we don't have enough time to do that. I encourage you to do surveys. The best place to do those surveys is to get connected with those communities. That's the whole engagement process. Getting into the communities in which your ideal target audience is going to be, your user that's going to use that product or that service is at. That can be your Chamber of Commerce, that can be your economic development offices, that can be centers like we have here. But the other really neat place is social media. Now, social media gives you a very wide, it's not targeted to a specific area, but if that's where your service is, and it is not targeted to a certain area, social media can be a great place to get sometimes some unwarranted feedback, but it will get you the feedback that you're looking for. So social media can also be a great place to ask that information and get that information that you're looking for. So I would look to, again, it goes back to making those connections while you're building business. Networking is huge. Having the connections with your local community and the development for pretty much, especially in this area, there with every single community, every single industry, there is some sort of networking opportunity or chamber or something in place. Get to know those, become a member of those communities, become a chamber member, just be involved. Essentially, that's what I'm telling you. Be involved, network, get to know, and get engaged within the communities. So that's going to be an important aspect of that. Okay, it looks like that is all the questions that we have. I'm going to go ahead and close out for today. Next week's class is Building Your Business with YouTube. That's a fun class. I really enjoy that class. For those that aren't registered with those and would like the link to that, I've added that to it. For anybody that has applied for a scholarship for the Grow Google Professional Certificates, I have not forgotten you. I was at a conference all week last week, and I was out for a couple of days because I had a tooth pulled, and so I am just getting back and trying to get caught up. I will be able to go through those today, hopefully, as long as we'll be able to get those caught up. So if you've applied for a scholarship to take the Google Professional Certificates and have not heard something, it is because I have not been able to get back and then send those to the advisory committee to get approvals on them. So don't stress. And I'll hopefully be able to get those okay today and get those out. So if you are still interested in those remote certificates, or not the remote certificates, the professional certificates, I still have scholarships, feel free to apply. One of the caveats within those, because I know that we have an international audience on here, those scholarships are only available in the US. So if you apply and you're not in the US, sadly you will be turned down for those. You can take and pay for those certificates outside the US, but they are only available, scholarships are only available within the US. So any other questions? One last call before I close out for today. Okay. Looks like we are good to go. Facebook is good. Okay, you guys have a wonderful day. We will see you next week on Grow with Google for how to build your business with YouTube. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.